So think about this for a second. In just the last 50 years, human beings have actually made more technological progress than in the previous, I don't know, 250,000 years combined.
Which is just a completely staggering reality when you really let it sink in.
Right. I mean, we are navigating this modern world full of literally godlike technology, but we're doing it using the exact same Paleolithic caveman emotions that our ancestors used to, avoid predators on the savannah.
Exactly. We have the exact same nervous systems.
Yeah. And that friction, that massive disconnect between our ancient biology and our hyperspeed reality is exactly where we're starting our audio exploration today.
It's the perfect starting point, really.
I think so too. Because, imagine waking up tomorrow to the blare of a 6 a.m. alarm.
Ugh, the absolute worst sound.
Oh, it's not a gentle waking at all. It's basically an auditory assault.
Right. Your heart just immediately spikes.
Yeah. It floods your entire system with adrenaline before your eyes are even, fully open. And then you stumble out of bed and your bare feet hit this shockingly cold floor.
That physical shock right out of the gate.
Right. And you're navigating to the kitchen in the pitch dark. You grab a travel mug of lukewarm coffee, burn your tongue slightly because you completely misjudged the temperature in your blurry-eyed haste, and you just rush out the door.
The standard morning sprint.
Exactly. And 20 minutes later, you are gripping the steering wheel in absolute bumper-to-bumper gridlock traffic.
With your blood pressure rising with every single brake light that flashes ahead of you.
Right. Or maybe you're holding onto a sticky subway pole instead, swaying with the momentum of the train, surrounded by a dozen other people.
And everyone is just bathed in that harsh blue fluorescent light of their smartphone screens.
Yes. You are physically surrounded by humanity, shoulder to shoulder, yet the isolation in that train car is just palpable.
It's a profoundly isolating shared experience. I mean, that sensory overload, the harsh lights, the sudden noises, the physical proximity, coupled with the emotional distance, it creates a chronic, low-grade biological stress.
Oh, totally. A constant hum of stress.
Yeah, because our nervous systems are registering constant environmental threats, but, we really just trying to get to a morning meeting.
Which is crazy when you think about it.
It is, and it's a scene that plays out millions of times every single morning all over the world. It's just a shared, almost entirely unquestioned ritual of modern existence.
It really is, and I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now. Because in the middle of that commute, or, maybe later in the afternoon while you're staring blankly at a complex spreadsheet under the artificial hum of office lights, there's this quiet, creeping sense of dread.
Oh, I know exactly the feeling you're talking about.
Right. It often accompanies this routine. You look at your life and realize you have done everything, quote unquote, right.
You've checked all the proverbial boxes.
Exactly. You followed the timeline society laid out. You got the degree. You chased the promotions. You bought all the modern conveniences.
Did everything you were supposed to do.
Right. Yet, despite doing everything right, you feel like an outdoor cat trapped inside a very small room.
Oh, I love that analogy. Just pacing the perimeter.
Yeah, you're restless. And the big question we're confronting today is a simple but terrifying one, which is just why?
It's the fundamental question.
Why, in a world where we are arguably more productive, more comfortable, and more hyperconnected than at any other point in the history of human civilization, do we feel so deeply disengaged?
And why does that modern definition of success leave us feeling so completely depleted?
Exactly. Hollow, even.
Well, the materials we're examining today frame this specific condition as a fundamental productivity paradox.
A productivity paradox. Okay, tell me more about that.
So, as a global culture, we have become obsessively fixated on output. We measure the value of our days, and honestly, sometimes the entire value of our self-worth, by how much we produce.
Right, like how many emails did I clear from my inbox today?
Exactly. How many tasks did you cross off the project management software? How many steps did your wearable device register?
We track absolutely everything.
We do. But in that relentless, heavily optimized pursuit of efficiency, we have entirely severed our connection to the underlying reasons behind the actions.
We completely lost the why.
We lost the why. And so the mission of our analysis today is to gradually unpack this exact tension.
I love that, because realizing the game is rigged is one thing, but how do we physically hit the brakes when the momentum of our lives is pushing us forward at 100 miles an hour?
Right. It's like trying to stop a freight train.
It really is. So, to understand why we need to slow down, we first have to examine the invisible rules that force us to run so fast in the first place.
The rules we don't even realize we're following.
Exactly. Where did this absolute urgency come from? You mentioned earlier that our biology is entirely mismatched to our technology, but how does that actually play out in our daily decision making?
Well, it plays out mainly through the overwhelming of our cognitive load,
Okay, meaning what exactly?
meaning that the texts we're studying highlight that because our brains are not evolved to process the sheer volume of data, the endless notifications, and the thousands of micro-decisions demanded by modern life, we resort to cognitive shortcuts.
Ah, because our brains are trying to save energy.
Precisely. They are incredibly energy-hungry organs. So to conserve calories, the brain relies heavily on automation and inherited behaviors.
So we just go on autopilot.
We do. We're operating with those ancient biological emotions in a world of godlike technology, as you said. And because of this extreme velocity, we blindly accept bizarre societal norms simply because questioning them requires too much mental energy.
That makes so much sense, like waking up in the pitch dark.
Yes, interrupting our natural circadian rhythms, or putting on restrictive, uncomfortable clothes that we would literally never wear by choice just to signal professional status.
Right, ties and stiff collars and heels.
Exactly. And sitting bathed in artificial light for 8 to 12 hours a day, denying our bodies natural sunlight to perform highly abstracted tasks that leave us feeling utterly unfulfilled.
And we just accept this immense physical and psychological discomfort as, the way things are.
Because the alternative feels way too exhausting to even contemplate.
It feels impossible. And there's actually a story in the source material that illustrates this psychological trap perfectly.
Oh, the Rose story.
Yes. It is such a fascinating look at how behaviors calcify over time. So it's about a person who, every time they prepared a roast for a family dinner, would carefully take a knife and cut the ends off the meat before placing it in the baking pan.
Which seems like a very specific, deliberate technique.
Right, and they did this ritualistically for years. So one day, their partner watches this process and finally asks, "Why do you cut the ends off the roast? You are literally throwing away perfectly good food."
A very logical question.
Exactly. And the person pauses, genuinely puzzled, and says, "Well, that is how my grandmother always did it. It's the family recipe."
It's the classic transmission of a cultural norm.
Yes, the behavior is replicated flawlessly, but the underlying reason for the behavior has been entirely lost.
Right. Completely forgotten.
So the person gets curious, picks up the phone, calls their grandmother, and asks, "Why did you always cut the ends off the roast before baking it? Does it change the flavor? Does it cook more evenly?"
And the grandmother's response is just brilliant.
It really is. She just laughs and replies, "No, I cut the ends off because my baking pan was too small."
It's such a humorous anecdote, but the sociological implications of it are actually profound.
Oh, totally.
This is what social scientists call path dependence. A decision or a behavior makes perfect sense given the constraints of a specific historical moment.
Like having a small baking pan in the mid-20th century.
Exactly. But then the constraints change. We get larger ovens, we buy bigger pans, yet the behavior continues, completely divorced from its original utility.
The context vanishes, but the action just remains totally rigid.
It does. And it forces us to look at our own daily routines and ask, how many ends of the roast are we cutting off in our own lives right now?
Oh man, probably dozens every single day.
Easily. How many habits, career trajectories, and daily stressors are we endlessly repeating simply because an entire generation before us did it that way to solve a problem that might not even exist anymore?
We just inherit the stress without inheriting the logic.
Perfectly said.
And the texts point out that this isn't just a matter of quirky family recipes. It is systematically programmed into us from childhood.
Oh, heavily programmed.
Right. Our educational systems and subsequently the corporate environments we graduate into heavily prioritize what the sources call convergent thinking.
And that is a really critical mechanism to understand.
Break that down for us a bit.
Sure. So convergent thinking is a cognitive approach where you start with a predetermined answer, the single right way to do things, and you basically force all the available facts and your own behaviors to fit that answer.
Like forcing a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly. It's a model born straight out of the Industrial Revolution. When mass public education was formalized, the goal was not to create philosophical free thinkers.
Right. They didn't want a bunch of philosophers on the assembly line.
No, the goal was to create compliant factory workers. The school bells literally mimicked factory bells.
Wow. I never thought about the bells that way.
Yeah, and the rows of desks, Mimicked assembly lines. The standardized tests were basically quality control checks. Convergent thinking is all about compliance and standardizing human output.
It's the ultimate multiple choice test model of life.
Yes.
There is one correct bubble to fill in, and any deviation from that bubble is just seen as a failure.
But the authors of these texts argue that to actually navigate the complexities of our current era, we desperately need to return to divergent thinking.
Which is the complete opposite cognitive approach, right?
It is. Divergent thinking starts with a curious question, a fundamental who says, or a why, and it explores endless nonlinear possibilities without knowing the final destination at all.
Which is how human beings naturally operate before all that conditioning takes hold.
Exactly. The research cited in our sources notes a staggering statistic regarding neuroplasticity.
Oh, the one about kids.
Yeah. Young children ask over 100 questions a day
100 questions.
because their brains are constantly building new neural pathways, probing, exploring, asking why the sky is blue, why society works the way it does, why certain rules exist.
But by the time we reach adulthood,
Through years of converging conditioning, the average adult asks barely half a dozen questions a day.
that is just so sad. We have literally trained the curiosity out of our own neurology.
Because curiosity is inefficient on an assembly line.
Okay, I hear that. And, the idea of reclaiming our childhood curiosity sounds incredibly romantic. But if I am putting myself in the shoes of our listener right now, stepping off the assembly line and questioning the system feels really dangerous.
It feels risky for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to say question everything when you're writing a philosophical book, but it's a very different reality when you have rent to pay or a mortgage or a family relying on your employer-sponsored health insurance.
The pragmatic reality of survival.
Exactly. Pushing back against the pace of modern life feels like being asked to change the tires on a car while you're driving 70 miles per hour down the highway.
That's a great visual.
You can't just hit the brakes without causing a massive catastrophic pileup in your personal and financial life. So how do the sources actually reconcile this call for disruption with surviving in a ruthless, pragmatic framework?
And that is probably the most vital pushback to this entire philosophy. But the texts do not shy away from the brutal pragmatism of survival.
Okay, so what do they suggest?
They acknowledge that living a life of disruption, choosing to actively ask why, and pushing back against that frantic momentum is not a gentle or passive experience.
That's going to be rough.
It is incredibly difficult and inherently risky. It requires immense psychological courage to look at the conveyor belt you're standing on, acknowledge that it's paying your bills, but still decide to step off or alter its speed.
Because people will react poorly to that.
Oh, you will undoubtedly face rejection. You will face misunderstanding from peers who are still running the race and who view your deceleration as a personal threat to their own choices.
Right. It makes them uncomfortable with their own lives.
Exactly. However, the resolution the texts offer requires us to look at the biological and psychological data of the alternative.
The cost of doing nothing.
Precisely. The cost of compliance. The alternative to this disruption is living a hollow life based on what the authors term counterfeit goals.
Counterfeit goals like what?
Like the arbitrary benchmarks of wealth, the prestigious job titles, the societal approval that we just chase on autopilot. And the data shows that chronic misalignment, living a life that actively conflicts with your internal values, takes a massive biological toll.
It literally makes us sick.
It manifests as chronic stress, severe burnout, autoimmune issues, and profound depressive states.
Yeah.
We are talking about the literal physical weathering of the body from sustained cortisol exposure. The texts argue that you might play it safe, you might suppress your curiosity to keep the health insurance, and you might reach the finish line completely exhausted.
Only to realize you were running the wrong race entirely.
Exactly. The emptiness of a life lived on autopilot, the psychological devastation of arriving at a destination you never actually wanted to reach, is a much heavier, much more fatal price to pay than the temporary instability of changing your own tires.
It's the terrifying realization that you successfully climbed the ladder only to find it was leaning against the wrong wall.
Such a powerful image.
So if we accept that premise, if we acknowledge that the inherited rules are flawed and the cost of blind compliance is just too high, how do we practically begin?
How do we actually do the thing?
Right. If questioning the system is the necessary mental shift, realizing that the roast doesn't need its ends cut off, how do we physically interrupt the relentless momentum of our frantic lives?
Well, the sources suggest the answer lies in the deliberate pause. We have to learn the mechanics of the exhale.
The exhale. Okay, this is where we transition from philosophy to physical intervention.
Yes. A major focus in the material is the reevaluation of our daily pace, specifically looking at the modern phenomenon of the rush hour.
Oh, the worst part of the day.
Right. For the vast majority of us, the commute is a grueling, hyper-competitive race toward a single destination. It's a daily obstacle course where our sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight response, is fully
Oh,
engaged.
completely. We view the vehicles around us as actual physical threats.
We view pedestrians as hindrances.
And we interpret transit delays not as like logistical issues, but as profound personal injustices against us.
Exactly. So the text suggests a radical cognitive behavioral shift here. What if we moved our psychological perspective away from this frantic threat-based race and consciously chose to experience the commute as an exercise in shared humanity?
Okay, I have to say, that sounds beautiful in theory, but when someone cuts you off in traffic on a Tuesday morning, shared humanity is literally the last thing on your mind.
Fair point. Very fair point.
But the sources do provide some incredibly grounding sensory examples of how to actually implement this shift in micro moments.
Right. It's not about being perfect all the time.
Exactly. The goal isn't necessarily to quit your corporate job today and move to an off-grid cabin. It's about finding physical slowness in the transitional moments of your day.
The small moments.
Yeah, like one of the creators interviewed in the sources describes the simple, mundane act of washing their hands.
Such a great example.
Usually for most of us, hand washing is just a rush necessity, right? A frantic 10-second scrubbing so we can sprint to the next task on our list.
While checking our phone with the other hand.
Probably. But this person describes reframing the act as a mini tea ceremony.
It is a brilliant application of mindfulness to interrupt the automated brain.
It really is. They describe feeling the actual physical texture of the bar of soap.
Paying attention to the details.
Yeah, paying hyper-focused attention to the warmth of the running water as it hits the skin, the physical sensation of the hands rolling together, the friction, the smell of the lather.
Just immersing in the sensory experience.
Exactly. By focusing entirely on the sensory input of the present moment, it becomes a complete physical grounding. It acts as a circuit breaker that abruptly stops the mental time travel.
That's the key, stopping the time travel.
Right. You stop agonizing over the email you sent an hour ago. You stop dreading the meeting you have in 20 minutes. And you are forced entirely into the reality of the present second.
And what is happening there on a neurological level is just crucial. By focusing on tactile awareness, you are actively dropping your body out of the sympathetic nervous system's stress response.
And moving into the parasympathetic system.
Exactly, engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and digestion. It physically calms you down.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And there's another beautiful, tangible example from the text that comes from the physical world of ceramics.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, a master potter describes the incredibly delicate process of working with clay, noting that the entire art form is governed by pacing and timing.
You literally cannot rush it.
You can't. If a potter is trying to join two separate pieces of clay together to build a structure, they cannot rush the process to meet a deadline.
Because if they do,
If one piece of clay is significantly drier than the other, if the moisture levels are not perfectly aligned through time and patience, the pieces will simply not adhere at a molecular level.
they just repel each other.
Right. If the potter forces it, if they rush the joining of a slab because they're in a hurry, the entire structure will inevitably crack and collapse in the kiln.
It's unforgiving.
Ceramics is an environment that strictly enforces patience. It provides a physical demonstration that slowness isn't a lack of momentum or a sign of laziness.
No, it's the fundamental structural condition required for integrity.
Integrity. That metaphor of the clay is so illuminating when you apply it to human relationships or complex creative work.
It translates perfectly.
You cannot just smash two underdeveloped ideas together or force two people into a high-pressure collaboration before the conditions are right.
If the emotional or intellectual moisture levels don't match, the whole project shatters under pressure.
Exactly. But this directly challenges our modern capitalistic understanding of what rest actually is.
It completely upends it. I mean, we are culturally conditioned, often from a very young age, to view slowness as a moral failing.
Like it's a sin to be slow.
Yes, we equate stillness with laziness, viewing it as a failure of productivity or just a lack of ambition.
Mm.
But the texts reframe slowness as an extended, necessary exercise and curiosity.
Okay, and exercising curiosity.
Yeah, because when we rest, when we allow our bodies and minds to be genuinely still without a screen in front of us, we activate what neuroscientists call the default mode network in the brain.
The default mode network.
Right. This is the network that lights up when we are daydreaming, wandering, or not focused on a specific goal-oriented task.
When we're just staring out the window.
Exactly. And it is in this resting state that the brain actually synthesizes disparate pieces of information.
That's when the aha moments happen.
Exactly. The material argues that entropy, downtime, and rest are not hindrances to the creative process. They are the vital biological engines of it. You cannot only inhale.
You have to exhale.
The human pulmonary system, much like the human spirit, must eventually exhale.
Yeah.
If you stubbornly hold your breath forever in an attempt to retain oxygen, you suffocate.
I want to pull on that thread because this completely warped definition of efficiency we have adopted is literally poisoning us.
It is toxic.
If we constantly optimize our lives for maximum speed and maximum output, utilizing every single life hack and scheduling app available, we entirely miss the actual texture of being alive.
I miss the whole point of it.
We do. And the sources point out how the digital age aggressively exacerbates this demand. It flattens our complex, multidimensional, messy human identities into two-dimensional bylines.
Optimize LinkedIn job titles.
Heavily curated social media posts. The system demands constant performative output. And as a result, we start treating our own biological energy like a smartphone battery.
Oh, that analogy is so spot on.
We view ourselves as machines that just need to be plugged into the wall quickly, get a fast 20-minute charge via a power nap or a double espresso so we can unplug and get right back out there to drain ourselves again.
It is the mechanization of the human body.
Yes, but human energy isn't a lithium-ion battery. You cannot fast charge biology without degrading the system.
It breaks down over time.
We are living, breathing ecosystems.
Yeah.
You cannot just fast charge a garden.
No, a garden doesn't operate on a 24-hour optimization cycle.
Not at all. It requires long, dormant seasons. It requires fallow periods where absolutely nothing appears to be happening on the surface, but vital nutrients are regenerating in the soil.
It requires rain and dark and immense amounts of unstructured time.
Right. So choosing to pause, choosing to consciously exhale and allow for that fallow period is framed in these texts not as some frivolous wellness trend, but as a profound act of quiet rebellion.
A rebellion against an economic system that demands perpetual machine-like output from biological creatures. The garden ecosystem is a much more scientifically accurate analogy for human energy than the battery. Ecosystems absolutely require cycles of decay and regeneration.
We depend on it.
They do.
Huh.
And when you finally give yourself the grace to adopt that biological pacing, when you bravely stop the frantic charging and draining cycle, something deeply challenging occurs.
A quiet.
The sudden silence can be utterly deafening. When you strip away the auditory noise of the commute, the dopamine hits of the inbox, the endless numbing scrolling on social media, you are left entirely alone with yourself.
Which is terrifying for most people.
It's confronting. All the distraction mechanisms are gone. And in that stark quiet, you are forced to confront the void and figure out what you actually want out of your finite time on this planet.
Wow.
And this confrontation brings us to a major psychological transition point in the human experience, which the sources describe as the difficult migration from the first mountain to the second mountain.
Ah, the two mountains.
Yeah.
That concept was one of the most arresting visuals in the entire text for me.
It's so clear.
So the first mountain represents everything that society, our parents, and our educational systems tell us we should spend our lives climbing.
The standard metrics of success.
Right. The pursuit of fame, financial fortune, societal validation, the corner office, the impressive resume, the perfect house.
Everything external.
It is a journey driven entirely by the ego and the desire for external acquisition. But the texts propose that eventually, usually in midlife, if we are actually paying attention to our internal state, we realize a dark truth.
That it's not enough.
The view from the top of that first mountain is incredibly lonely. The air is thin, and the achievement is fundamentally unfulfilling. You get there and think, is this all there is?
It's the classic midlife crisis point.
Exactly. That is the crisis point where we have to voluntarily descend back into the valley, which is hard enough, and begin the arduous climb up the second mountain.
And this new mountain is defined by completely different metrics.
Service to others, deep intrinsic meaning, authentic joy, and the discovery of what the authors call our true north.
And discovering that true north is not a passive event where you just wait for an epiphany to strike you while you're drinking coffee.
No, you have to work for it.
To uncover the bedrock of your actual desires, the materials propose a very specific, highly revealing psychological exercise.
The 25 reasons list.
Yes, it asks the reader to sit down with a blank piece of paper and write out 25 distinct reasons why they do what they do.
Which sounds simple, but it's not.
Not at all. Why are you in your current career? Why do you maintain your current frantic pace? Why do you live in the city you live in?
Writing out 25 distinct reasons for anything sounds mentally exhausting.
It is designed to be.
Like, if I sat down right now to do that about my own career, I think I could list maybe 5 or 6 reasons before I hit a complete brick wall.
And hitting that brick wall is exactly the intended psychological mechanism of the exercise.
Oh, really?
Yes. The human brain is incredibly skilled at constructing defensive narratives.
Are she?
Exactly. The first 5 or 10 reasons you write down on that paper are almost always superficial, pre-rehearsed, or defensive.
They're the safe answers.
They are the socially acceptable, logical answers that you have been trained to give. I do this job to pay my rent. I want to look successful to my peers. I am saving up to buy a nicer car. I need the stability of health insurance.
Right, and those are practical realities.
They are practical realities, but they are surface-level rationalizations. They are the armor. But the exercise forces you to keep writing.
And that's where it gets hard.
Right, because as you push past reason number 12, number 15, a profound cognitive shift occurs. The phenomenon of cognitive depletion sets in.
You literally get too tired to lie to yourself.
Exactly. The prefrontal cortex, which manages your ego and your social mask, literally tires out. The defensive rationalizations run dry because you have exhausted the script.
Wow.
And that is the precise moment when the subconscious mind is forced to take over the pen.
You bypass the pre-programmed answers entirely.
You dig deeper.
It reminds me of drilling through geological strata. The first few layers of rock and topsoil you hit with the drill are just the recent accumulations, right?
The loose dirt.
Yeah, the superficial dirt of societal conditioning and immediate anxieties. It is easy to dig through, but it doesn't tell you much about the core of the earth.
Not at all.
You have to keep the drill running, generating friction and heat, pushing past the hard, resistant layers of your own ego and fear to finally strike the deep bedrock.
And that bedrock holds the foundational elements of your actual identity.
The 25 Reasons exercise is basically a drill bit for the psyche.
That geological visualization perfectly captures the friction involved. By the time you are scraping the barrel of your mind for reason 20, 22, or 25, you start hitting raw, unfiltered truth.
The polished answers are gone.
Completely gone. You start writing things like, I do this because I desperately want to nourish others. I'm pushing myself this hard to heal a deep wound from my childhood. I have an overwhelming urge to create beauty in a dark world. Or, I want to leave a legacy of kindness that outlasts my physical life. You bypass the pragmatic survival instincts and connect directly with the core driver of your soul.
And when you hit that bedrock, it can be totally life-changing.
It shifts everything.
And the sources share a truly poignant, real-life story to illustrate what it looks like when a human being is actually operating from that deep, true north place.
Even in the most difficult circumstances.
Even in the complete absence of material security. So the text describes an 11-year-old child who was growing up in a tiny, smoky, incredibly cramped apartment in an impoverished neighborhood.
A really tough environment.
Right. Financial resources were incredibly scarce. Every meal was a calculation. But despite the harshness of that environment, the parent in this story consistently, deliberately taught the child an abundance mindset.
Which is incredible under those conditions.
It is. They practice radical, almost illogical sharing with what little they had. If they had a meager portion of food, they would share it with a neighbor who had less.
Giving it away when they barely had enough themselves.
Exactly. They did not hoard their scarce resources in a state of biological fear. They actively offered them outward.
Which, from a strictly evolutionary biology standpoint, defies all logical survivalist instinct.
Completely.
When resources are scarce, the organism's instinct is to hoard and protect.
Exactly. It is a defiance of base instinct. But by choosing that radical generosity, that parent instilled a lifelong true north in the neural pathways of that child.
They set the compass early.
They taught them that generosity, community connection, and internal wealth are infinitely more valuable and ultimately more sustaining than external hoarding.
It's a profound shift in values.
The child learned at a foundational level that their inherent worth as a human being was not tied to the balance in a bank account, but to their limitless capacity to give to others.
It is a profound lived lesson in prioritizing the ascent of the second mountain over the false promises of the first, right from the very beginning of life.
It is a beautiful narrative of overcoming circumstance through core values.
However,
Yeah. However, we have to address the persistent skepticism that arises when discussing these lofty ideals.
the reality check.
Right. Practically speaking, how do we navigate the abrasive conflict between our high-minded aspirations, our deep desire to be generous, to create beauty, to serve our communities, and our very real, immediate, pragmatic needs?
Because we still require sustenance.
We still have to procure housing and navigate the demands of a capitalist framework that, frankly, does not inherently reward intrinsic meaning.
It absolutely doesn't, and the
Yeah.
texts recognize this friction and offer some intense cognitive thought experiments to help bridge that gap.
Bridge the gap between surviving today and planning for a meaningful legacy.
Exactly. They invite the reader to engage in temporal distancing.
Temporal distancing, okay.
Right, by imagining writing their own obituary or drafting a detailed letter from the perspective of their future self at the very end of their life.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is, but the psychological goal here is to forcefully bypass the immediate, loud, amygdala-driven anxieties of daily survival.
It forces a massive zoom out.
When you project your consciousness forward and look back on your life from its ultimate conclusion, the intense anxiety over whether you answered a mundane work email at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday suddenly reveals itself as absurdly irrelevant.
You realize how small it is.
You connect with your ultimate purpose. You are forced to answer the only questions that actually remain. What do I actually want to be remembered for? How did I make the people around me feel?
That temporal shift puts everything into a harsh, clarifying light. But this brings up a massive structural challenge.
Oh, absolutely.
When you finally do the hard work of aligning with that true north, when you realize in your bones that you want to prioritize deep meaning over frantic output, you will inevitably collide with traditional systems.
They will fight back.
The corporate world, the prevailing societal expectations, even well-meaning family members who love you but are terrified for your financial safety.
They will all actively try to pull you back into the current of conformity.
Yes, they will hand you the well-worn script for the first mountain, point to the summit, and demand that you keep climbing.
Because your change threatens their script.
So how do you protect this fragile, newfound purpose from being crushed by the machinery of the world?
Well, this tension leads us into a deep analysis of reclaiming personal sovereignty from what the sources call power over systems.
Power over systems, the linguistic distinction they make here is absolutely crucial, right?
It's vital for understanding organizational behavior. They draw a very sharp, defining line between traditional hierarchies and true personal sovereignty.
Okay, let's bring that down.
Traditional hierarchies, which represent the vast majority of our workplaces, governments, and legacy institutions, operate almost entirely on a dynamic of exerting power over others or, conversely, yielding power to others.
It's a ladder.
It is fundamentally a zero-sum game of dominance and submission. For someone to win, someone else must lose.
But true personal sovereignty is a completely different paradigm.
Completely different. It is not about controlling anyone else's behavior or hoarding resources. It is the realization of power within.
Power within.
It is the practice of self-authorship, regardless of external pressures.
But those power over systems are everywhere. If we look closely at the architecture of our environments, particularly the pipeline from educational institutions directly into corporate systems,
The whole assembly line again.
yeah, we see they are largely engineered for compliance, not for individual creativity or sovereignty. From a very young age, sitting silently in rows of identical desks.
Raising a hand to ask permission to speak or use the restroom.
Right, we are behaviorally trained to seek approval from a centralized authority. We learn early on that success and safety mean pleasing the authority figure.
It's Pavlovian conditioning.
It is, and this conditioning trains us to constantly look outward for validation, which makes us incredibly vulnerable to manipulation later in life.
We just keep seeking permission.
But the texts describe moments of profound disruption to this conditioning, moments of outright rejection. They share several anecdotes of individuals who, while trying to play the game, were explicitly told, "You do not belong here," by the gatekeepers of elite institutions.
Which, given our conditioning to seek approval, is usually experienced as a devastating psychological blow.
Oh, crushing.
Rejection from the hierarchy is the ultimate fear for a compliant mind.
But here is the brilliant inversion the material offers. Instead of accepting this rejection as a personal failure or a defeat, it frames these specific moments as liberating catalysts.
It flips the script entirely.
If an institution looks at you and says you do not belong in their specific game, playing by their rigid rules, the illusion of the game is instantly broken.
You're out of the matrix.
You are suddenly free. The heavy burden of trying to contort yourself to fit their mold is lifted. You are now free to step off their playing field entirely and invent your own game, with rules that align with your true north.
You are free to define your own independent metrics for what constitutes a successful life.
So if we transition this philosophy into pragmatic action, what does this all mean for how we actually operate within our careers?
Well, the discussion in the text shifts to this fascinating, highly autonomous concept of the agent.
The agent.
Right. When an individual achieves true personal sovereignty, their daily experience of work transforms. It often feels like acting as an agent or an ambassador for a mission that is much larger than yourself.
It detaches the ego.
This crucial shift entirely removes the fragile ego from the equation. When you are no longer obsessively trying to dominate others to soothe your own internal insecurities, your entire perspective on collaboration shifts.
You see things differently.
You stop viewing the modern workplace as a competitive, cutthroat ladder where you have to step on a colleague's fingers to pull yourself higher.
Which is how most people view it.
Instead, you begin to see the professional landscape as a collaborative, interconnected network of nodes. You see other people not as obstacles to your promotion, but as fellow creators with distinct skills that can complement your own.
Okay, that sounds like a utopian workplace, but I have to interject with the brutal reality most people face. If you consciously decide to step out of that power dynamic entirely, if you unilaterally refuse to play the dark arts of workplace politics, if you stop the posturing, the credit stealing, and the dominance games...
You just get eaten alive.
Yeah. Don't you just make yourself prey? Don't you just get run over by the Machiavellian climbers who are still ruthlessly playing the game? Does declaring your own sovereignty essentially make you a victim in a corporate environment?
That is the million-dollar question, and it is a completely valid fear based on how these systems operate.
It's a real risk.
But the resolution offered in the text is very firm here. Personal sovereignty is absolutely not passivity.
Okay.
It is not rolling over and exposing your neck. It is taking radical, uncompromising, almost militant responsibility for your own reactions, your own boundaries, and exactly where you direct your energy.
So how does that protect you?
The sources argue that when you engage in a purely creative act, and they define this broadly, not just painting a masterpiece, but even something as small as taking 10 dedicated minutes a day to sketch, to write a private reflection, to build a small project entirely for yourself without monetizing it. You step off the competitive game board entirely.
You change the game.
You shift the underlying currency of your life. You stop trading your adrenaline, your cortisol, and your peace of mind for artificial corporate status, and you begin trading in the currency of genuine connection and creative expression.
And that makes you immune.
The paradox is that you actually become untouchable by the old game because you are simply no longer registering on their frequency.
Oh, that is fascinating.
When you stop emitting the pheromones of fear and desperate competition, the predators in the hierarchy often just lose interest in you. The locus of control shifts entirely inward.
You essentially change the rules of engagement so thoroughly that they don't even know how to play against you anymore.
Exactly. They thrive on the friction you used to provide.
What is fascinating here is the profound physical and emotional shift that accompanies this realization. When you finally stop fighting for power over others, the exhausting need for that constant adrenaline rush, that addiction to stress, it just begins to fade.
Your nervous system finally regulates.
But it also means accepting a fundamental, sometimes terrifying truth about your trajectory. Living a life of personal sovereignty means acknowledging that your path will no longer follow the predictable straight line that society promised you.
The linear narrative is gone.
The comforting linear narrative of go to school, get a stable job, get married, buy a house, retire at 65, and finally be happy. That neat, orderly progression completely shatters.
And shattering that illusion is deeply disorienting for the human brain, which craves predictability above almost anything else.
We want the map.
We are culturally obsessed with linear milestones because they provide a false sense of security. We expect our lives to unfold as neat, digestible narratives. We want a clear beginning, a stable, productive middle, and a tidy, victorious end.
But reality doesn't work that way.
No. But the sources urge us to completely let go of that obsession with linearity. Reality, especially a life lived authentically, is not a straight line on a graph.
What is it then?
Reality is a constant chaotic swirl of what the texts refer to as middle moments.
Middle moments.
These are the profoundly uncomfortable liminal spaces. These are the confusing chapters where the old method, the old career path, or the old way of relating to people clearly no longer works. But the new way hasn't been forged yet.
You are standing at a crossroads in the fog.
Exactly. And it is a space of intense vulnerability.
It is the terrifying space between trapezes.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
You have built up the courage to let go of the first swinging bar, but you are suspended in midair, plummeting toward the ground, and you haven't caught the second bar yet.
You're just in free fall.
It requires immense trust. And a crucial part of successfully navigating these non-linear, terrifying chapters is fundamentally changing our psychological relationship with the concept of ending.
Because we are terrified of them.
Yeah. We are deeply, intensely culturally conditioned to fear endings of any kind. The end of a job, the dissolution of a relationship, the failure of a creative project. We almost universally frame these events as tragic failures.
We view them as a step backward.
We hold on tightly, white-knuckling situations that are actively destroying our well-being simply because we are terrified of the finality and the perceived shame of an ending.
We'd rather be miserable than admit it's over.
Exactly. But the texts offer a profound biological reframing. They suggest we view endings not as failures, but as necessary events of energy transference.
Energy transference.
Yeah.
The biological analogy used in the text here is incredibly vivid and precise.
Oh, the autumn season 1?
Yes. They compare these unavoidable life endings to the biological process of the season of fall.
Which is such a sensory experience.
Exactly. When you think about the sensory experience of autumn, there is that sudden, crisp bite in the air, the chill that catches you off guard and makes you shiver.
You feel it in your bones.
There are plump, heavy, freezing raindrops. There is that distinct, instinctual physical sensation of wrapping your arms tightly around your own torso as the wind blows, trying desperately to conserve your core warmth.
Right, trying to protect yourself from the elements.
The text suggests that in these chaotic moments of life endings, you have to recognize that the person underneath all those protective layers is fundamentally changing.
It's happening at a cellular level.
Literally. In biology, there's a process called apoptosis, which is programmed cell death.
Sounds terrifying.
It sounds destructive, but it's actually essential for the health of the entire organism.
How so?
Well, just like deciduous trees systematically sever the connection to their own leaves in the fall. Not out of failure, but to deliberately conserve vital energy for the harsh winter and to prepare the necessary architecture for new growth in the spring.
Wow, they drop the leaves on purpose.
Yes. And we, too, must actively shed our past identities, letting go of who we were, letting go of the titles and the security that no longer serve our true north is not a failure.
It's a necessity.
It is a biological and spiritual necessity for our future survival and growth.
But let's be honest, that shedding process is rarely an elegant, Instagram-worthy transition.
Oh, never.
It is painful. The texts remind us that taking those first tentative steps into a new, unscripted chapter is exactly like writing the first draft of a manuscript.
Which is always a disaster.
It is inherently messy. It is completely indeterminate. It is filled with glaring errors, embarrassing missteps, and sometimes the entire endeavor is destined to fail completely.
The classic, terrible first draft.
But the failure of a first draft isn't the end of the author's career. It is the generation of the necessary raw material. You cannot edit a blank page.
You need something to work with.
The failure is the compost for the second draft.
And this brings up a concept we touched on earlier, regarding the profound, almost transgressive permission to be a novice again.
Permission to be bad at things.
Yes. In our modern culture of immediate performative expertise, where everyone is expected to be a thought leader, we absolutely hate being bad at things.
It bruises the ego so much.
It's humiliating. But the material argues that before you can be truly masterful at being yourself, your fully sovereign, authentic, unscripted self, you have to be willing to be terribly publicly bad at it first.
You have to stumble.
Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to actually change, requires the friction of making errors. The brain learns through prediction error.
It needs the mistakes to build the pathways.
Therefore, you have to try on new behaviors, new careers, or new ways of speaking that feel entirely out of character just to see if they fit your new coordinates.
Like trying on clothes that don't quite fit yet.
Exactly. You have to allow yourself to wander aimlessly without a GPS or a 5-year plan. You have to embrace the terrifying, chaotic unknown without immediately rushing to control the outcome or optimize the experience for resume.
It is about relinquishing the illusion of control in order to gain actual discovery.
Because control's an illusion anyway.
Right. If we constantly act as micromanagers of our own destiny, dictating exactly how and when our lives must unfold, we leave absolutely no room for serendipity, for unexpected growth, or for the quiet, slow emergence of that true north we discussed.
We squeeze the life right out of it.
We have to grant ourselves the grace to be perpetual works in progress, acknowledging that the messy middle moments, the chaotic first drafts, are not the obstacles to our life. They are where the actual textured living happens.
Which brings us to a beautiful, expansive place to kind of zoom out.
The macro view.
Right. When we synthesize this deeply personal, psychological journey, this radical shift in pacing, these courageous choices to rewrite our values, this quiet rebellion against the cult of the rush, and we tie it to our broader existence as a species on this planet,
It gets really deep.
we arrive at a profoundly humbling realization presented in the conclusion of these texts.
It is the ultimate perspective shift.
Yes. We are finite biological beings, granted an incredibly limited number of days and a finite reservoir of energy, floating within an infinite eternal universe that is expanding at the speed of light.
It's almost too big to think about.
Trying to fully comprehend the vastness of that existence with our Paleolithic brains is impossible. We are quite literally like ants trying to understand the processing power of a supercomputer.
Just structurally incapable of grasping it.
Yet, paradoxically, our true human potential lies in the audacity of that very attempt.
In trying, anyway.
The texts conclude that our ultimate power as a species is not found in dominating our natural environment. It is not found in ruthlessly climbing corporate ladders, and it is certainly not found in optimizing every single microsecond of our day for maximum economic output.
None of that actually matters in the grand scheme.
Our actual transcendent power lies in our unique capacity to experience wonder. It lies in our profound ability to love deeply without a return on investment, to forgive ourselves and others for our messy, failing first drafts, and to connect deeply and authentically with the sensory reality of the present moment.
The rough texture of the soap.
The cool moisture of the potter's clay.
And the fragile, shared humanity of the strangers riding the subway beside us.
Exactly.
We have this audacious, incredible, built-in capacity to rewrite the rules of how we live our lives. We do not have to just passively accept the exhausting linear script we were handed at birth.
Precisely. We have the neurological and spiritual capacity to look at the unexamined assumptions of modern society, the arbitrary timelines, the destructive power dynamics, the hollow cult of speed, and simply, quietly ask, who says?
Who says it has to be this way?
Who says?
That is the real power of the divergent mind. And I want to leave you, our listener, with a warm, lingering question to turn over in your mind as you go about the rest of your day.
Something to sit with.
Yeah. Tomorrow morning, when that 6 a.m. alarm shatters the silence and your bare feet hit that shockingly cold floor.
Before the rush begins.
Right. Before you reach for your phone, before you bathe your eyes in that harsh blue light, before you start frantically, anxiously listing your endless tasks for the day, I want you to pause.
Just for a moment.
Just stand there on the cold floor for 10 seconds, feel the temperature, feel your breath, and ask yourself, whose script am I reading today? And what would happen if, just for today, I decided to leave the stage, embrace the terrifying unknown, and write my own?